only people to knock out Stephen Thompson or to knock out Robert Whittaker, Stephen Thompson, Adesanya. And let's be honest, does anyone really believe that Dricus was going to knock out Robert Whittaker? I thought it would be one of those, listen, Dricus is talking himself into a title fight. He's going to have to get past Whittaker. I don't see that happening personally. That was what I was saying before the fight. And I hope there's plenty that are honest and say and says the same thing. But nonetheless, he gets in there against Robert Whittaker. First minute and a half to 2 minutes and a half of the fight, it was mostly Robert Whittaker leading the dance, using footwork, landing some jabs, feigning, and then landing a jab. He had Dricus, if you guys remember, he had Dricus responding to the feints. And we said that live, and so did many others after the stream, but we said that during the fight. If Dricus is biting off the feints like this, maybe Whittaker wasn't able to make Dricus make him pay. Adesanya will make him pay for biting on almost every feint. Granted, then in the second half of the first round, Dricus started to apply some pressure, had a strong jab, a beautiful outside leg trip, and not only I wasn't impressed with the takedown, but I was even more impressed him getting the takedown and being able to keep Robert Whittaker down there. Nobody really keeps Whittaker on the bottom whenever they are able to get a takedown. Robert Whittaker is so skilled and so crafty in getting back up to his feet, right? So for Dricus to do what he did as far as the outside leg trip, the controlling him on the bottom, I think he got to full side control. Is it sort of recency bias? Yes, but I think it's accurate. Super impressed with Dricus being able to pull that off. Jesus says, Du Plessis versus Cannonier, winner gets title shot. It's already collectively agreed. Joe Rogan has said it. It appears that Dana White is cool with it. I think the next fight that we're going to get is Dricus for the title shot, Jesus, unless there's barring any injury or anything like that. But I don't believe that's the case. Dricus didn't really take that much damage. Joe Rogan says in the post-fight interview something along the lines of, when you earn the title shot, you're going to get it. I think Dana White is on board. That's the fight that Adesanya wants. The one fighter that I thought would skip ahead, Jesus, was Sean Strickland. But it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case, because even Sean Strickland said it in a Schmo interview. If you guys watched the Schmo, he said, Sean Strickland says, I wouldn't mind playing backseat to Dricus if he goes out there and knocks out Robert Whittaker. He said that before the fight, maybe saying that thinking that's not going to happen. That's exactly what happens. Let's keep on playing the video.
No.
So to your question, I don't think he fights Cannonier next. I think he goes straight for the title. I will be very surprised if anything other, because not only that, the UFC, they're a business. They want to make the fights that sell the most tickets. Kind of slow pacing the momentum that Dricus has by now after him beating Robert Whittaker, the quote unquote gatekeeper of the division, to give him Cannonier, to me makes no sense. But here we go.
If not, we saw his fight with Alex Pereira. If I get him to the floor, it is not even a fight.
I wouldn't have believed you, Dricus. I wouldn't have believed you if you said this before the Whittaker fight. His ability to control, and I'm sure Adesanya will make the necessary adjustments or at least work on them. I wouldn't believe Dricus if he said this before the Whittaker fight. But he says, if I get him to the canvas, it won't even be a fight.
We saw his fight with Alex Pereira. If I get him to the floor, it is not even a fight. It's not even a fight. If I just get my hands on him, it's not even a fight.
Is Dricus... Is it fair for Dricus to say that? Do we take him seriously after the performance against Robert Whittaker? I know it was one fight. And I know in most cases, one fight is not good enough to go off. But when you insert the name Robert Whittaker as far as the opponent,
I will manhandle him.
And Dricus next to Robert Whittaker, saying this live as well too, Dricus looked big for the division. He just looked like the bigger man against Whittaker significantly. He says, I will manhandle Adesanya.
Done it before and I'll do it again.
Has Adesanya been manhandled before? I would say no, unless you're talking about the Pereira knockout. And not even that. He was leading that fight until the 5th round where he got put out by Pereira. But not only that, The only other fight that he was necessarily manhandled is when he went up in weight to fight Jan Blachowicz. And not that Blachowicz blew him out the water, but it was more so manhandled. Jan Blachowicz was able to take it to the ground and hold him there. Jan Blachowicz was able to land even the more significant strikes because it was up a division and Blachowicz was the bigger man. Dricus says almost identically that he'll do the same thing.
Again. And, as far as the striking goes, let's take that out of the question.
Let's take the striking out of the question.
You are as good as your last performance. What did
You're as good as your last performance. And this is something I wanted to allude to.
his last performance look like against Whittaker? Yeah, he beat him.
He knocked Whittaker out in their first fight. And in their second fight, it was a super, super close fight against Whittaker and Adesanya. So he says you're only as good as your last fight, right? That's a very common phrase.
Beat him. It was a close fight. What did my last performance against Whittaker?
It's a good question. It's a smart question to ask. Well, how did I look against Whittaker compared to Adesanya? Who had the better performance? As far as both of them most recently fighting Whittaker, and I know I'm making a big case for Dricus, but we'll get there to my final point, but he has a point.
Look like. So right now, that's how I plan on beating him, the same way I beat Whittaker tonight, by implementing the game plan and sticking to my style and doing what we.
And his style is somewhat awkward, somewhat stationary. I remember Hito609 saying this live on Saturday, and look at freaking Hito's profile picture. But good morning, Steve, by the way, too. Speaking of Dricus, Hito said that he looked a little bit stiff, and I have to agree, he did. But it worked. You know, the jab worked, the takedown worked. Beta says Blachowicz manhandled him, but that's an entirely different division. 100% agree with you. That's why I mentioned it. It's an entirely different division where Blachowicz was just a bigger man, and that power just, to go up in weight is very tough to do for fighters. Volkanovski almost got it done against Makhachev, and I can't wait to talk about that as well either. But you're absolutely right. It's an entirely different division to what I was alluding to earlier, and MMA math doesn't make sense. Just because Adesanya was able to just win a close decision, and because Dricus now knocks him out, MMA triangle theory, MMA math doesn't necessarily work. You're absolutely right.
We do best. Listening to my coaches, listening to the great Mornay Visser, the great teammates I have at CIT, a small gym in South Africa, coming up with game plans with this awkward style.
Coming up with game plans and this awkward style. This is something that I brought up on Saturday. Is Dricus that powerful that he knocked down Whittaker with a jab? Because he switched to southpaw. Maybe that's his dominant hand. Yes, so his powerful hand. But it was still a jab. His right foot was his lead foot. He lands a jab. He knocks down Whittaker. He ends up closing the show. Is it more that Dricus is that powerful? Or is Robert Whittaker chinny? Is the question to you guys. I would love to hear some thoughts, but is Whittaker a little bit chinny, or is Dricus just that powerful? You heard him say a bit ago that we come up with my awkward style, we game plan. What's the game plan to beat Adesanya if you're Dricus? What scares me for Dricus is biting on those feints. Adesanya, yeah, he's a smart fighter. If the knockout presents itself, he'll get it. But I will say, I think a lot of people sleep on Adesanya's power as well. People claim and accuse of being a boring fighter. But at the end of the day, if he's boring and if he doesn't have power, why are fighters not just straight rushing in? It's because he keeps you honest. Israel versus Du Plessis in Africa. Wow. Wait, hold on a second. Ba, 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 right? Like, Jesus. I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier, man. That's why the chat is goated. What if you guys remember, Dana White has been talking about this a lot. He's been saying, I want to get to Africa. I want to make a card in Africa. He has been saying this over and over again. I hope Dana White thinks so. Imagine Kamaru versus Hamza. Oh my God. Imagine Kamaru versus Hamza. Adesanya versus Dricus in Africa. they don't have Francis Ngannou. They failed on that one as well too. But there's plenty of other African fighters that they could come up with. But imagine those two, Kamaru and Adesanya. In this case, Dricus looked like he belonged against Whittaker. After the first 2.5 minutes, after the first half of the first round, he looked like he belonged there with Whittaker, and he beat him. Whether he's going to be able to do that against Adesanya and look like he belongs, Adesanya's footwork, his pacing, and just style. Whittaker might do well against Adesanya if they fight a third time, but maybe Adesanya's style is going to be a little bit more troubling. Whittaker has some decent footwork against Dricus, but Adesanya is going to be moving a lot more. And not only that, he's also going to be throwing things to keep you honest, way more than Whittaker was able to against Dricus, in my opinion. Now, if Dricus gets his hands on him and gets a takedown and lands on top, I don't think Adesanya does as good as Whittaker getting back up to his feet. So I'm for that fight. Let's catch up with chat.